All right, let me mute everybody and then we'll give Mark the floor.
Well, it's still 5:04.
Oh, okay, we can wait. I'm in no hurry. Everybody muted themselves anyway. Everyone was getting it in quickly. Didn't want to wait for me, I guess.
I like that everyone's staring at the clock right now.
Do it's not muted. Do it laughed.
Well,
You have a nice laugh to it. Yeah.
All right, now I'll mute everybody and I'll give Mark the floor.
I forget that you mute me as well. You see, that's the mistake I always make. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way it works.
Thank you for giving me the floor and the room. Well, we are delighted today to have a special feature with Carolyne Wright, Susana H. Case, Maria Mazziotti Gillan, and Lillo Way. We're looking forward to this show very much, and we can't wait to present them to you. But as the regulars know, we always start with a poem each, the three of us co-hosts. And so first I'm going to introduce Jonathan Penton, who in 1998 founded unlikelystories.org, an electronic journal of literature and art. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to a number of literary and artistic ventures such as Mad Hat, the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He's organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chap, Blood and Salsa, and Painting Rust, Prosthetic Gods, Standards of Sadity, and the free e-chap book Backstories, which you can download from Argotist eBooks. What you got for us today, Jonathan?
Thanks, Mark. So as the regulars have heard me say many times, I'm not all that prolific. And what I do most weeks is I read something we've recently published at unlikelystories.org. And this week, I'm really delighted to read Habeas Corpus by Deborah Kennedy, again from the site unlikelystories.org. So this poem. 1. In Runnymede Muddy Meadow, the glorious proposition arises. A. The great charter of liberty is carefully inscribed on sheepskin parchment. 1. When held aloft, people cheer loudly and wave their arms. 2. Some still grip the hilts of their swords. B. 600 years later, the proposition is our bedrock. 1. Unfortunately, we never notice the ground until there is an earthquake. 2. Remembering things is a lot of work. A. Long ago, we believed that God appointed kings. 1. Kings believed they should hire men to wipe their asses. 2. You wipe your own ass. B. Today, the king did not mount your head on a pike at the city gates. 1. Or even the head of someone you might like to see there. 2. No one notices. 3. Teachers are speaking of the proposition. A. Everyone forgets almost everything. 1. Anyhow, who knows Latin anymore? B. History is just a lot of stuff that already happened. 1. Is the suspension clause suspended? 2. This all happened a long time ago, right? 4. Change is expectable, but by its very nature, unpredictable. A. Something happens. 1. It is not called by its true name. 2. This works as well as it ever did. B. They call them rendered persons. 1. This does not refer to Lord. 5. Thinking is a lot of work. A. Today, we celebrate forgetting everything we have forgotten. 1. This apparently includes what happened yesterday. 2. Will the sun ever set on the second act? B. No one ever thinks, hey, they could render me next. 1. Equality before the law can cut 2 ways. 2. Besides, exactly what is lard and how is it rendered? 6. We all walk on the edge of a knife. A. It hurts. 1. We ignore the pain. B. We don't know which way we will fall. 1. Falling doesn't usually kill you. 2. Landing can. 3. Who will even count the bodies then? Okay, again, that was Habeas Corpus by Deborah Kennedy. And next up, we're going to hear from Cassandra Atherton. Cassandra is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poems on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. I read it, it's wonderful. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, An Introduction, and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. I haven't read those, she should send me copies. She is commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine. Cassandra, will you read for us today?
Yes, absolutely. So I love Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It's one of my favorite novels. And so this is a bit of a cheeky one based on that. It's called Eclair. She's a derby field from the tips of her toes to the peduncle of the strawberry on her lips. Pity the pithy pith that touches her lips but is severed by her teeth. She prefers Demeter to Artemis, but she's no corn dolly. On May Day, she stands on the bar at Rolliver's with a strawberry daiquiri in her hand and a horn of plenty at her feet. There's nothing cornball about cornucopias. She's not interested in genealogy, the complete fortune teller, or Macbethian comparisons of the Thane of Cawdor to her father. Her numbers of tomorrows, just all in a line, now belong to smart Alex and men called after celestial beings. She gallops away on Prince, hale and hardy. She's not anybody's angel in the house. And I would like to introduce Mark Vincennes. Please join in if you know parts of his amazing bio. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published 18 books of poetry, including more recently, Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, Here Comes the Night Dust, Einstein Fledermaus, and The Little Book of Earthly Delights. Vincennes' newest and most beautiful collection is A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, and it was released by Unlikely Books, so grab a copy. An album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also, as you know, a prolific translator who has translated from German, Romanian, and French, you know it. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Merz with White Pine in 2018. It was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Merz's selected poems in Audible Blue is forthcoming from White Pine Press. He is currently working on a novel, it's so great, people, entitled The Age of Occasions. Watch out for it. He is editor and publisher of the wonderful Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world. I can hear you joining in. From Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in the famous Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where, drumroll, there are more 6 spotted orb weavers, woodlouse hunters, and northern black widows than people. Oh, that was a great one. I've got a widow's peak, so I like widowy things. Mark, will you please read for us?
Yes, absolutely. This poem is called Man on a High Wire, and it's from a collection that I just recently finished called The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars. A blue-backed sky. A cat scampers through shrubs, over leaves, outside the blue-backed sky, and the clatter of stones in the wood. Further off, an engine growls. What do you hold in your hands? A pole to prod your way through the chicken wire, to beat off the bears? Look down to the bottom where solid matter meets the floor, behind tabloids, registration numbers in election years, or the hungry who die by the millions, and even when emphatically magical folk live, or sometimers, the marginalia, those pretending to hide in the interior, quite often, in fact, look back into the bloodshot eyeball of time, tree after tree in our strange groves, where the wind whistles questions and the blue-backed sky growls outside in the sky-high houses, sneers in the mirrored glass and says, shall we give them the sun or snuff out the stars? And I'm now delighted to introduce the first of our feature readers tonight, Carolyne Wright, whose new book is Masquerade, a memoir in poetry from Lost Horse Press. Her previous book is This Dream, the World, new and selected poems, also from Lost Horse, and whose title poem won a Pushcart Prize and also appeared in the Best American Poetry 2009. Her groundbreaking anthology, Raising Lily Ledbetter, Women Poets Occupy Workspace, also from Lost Horse, received 10 Pushcart nominations. Carolyne has 9 earlier books and chapbooks of poetry, a volume of essays, and 5 award-winning volumes in translation from Spanish and Bengali. A contributing editor for the Pushcart Prizes, she teaches for Seattle's Richard Hugo House and for literary conferences and festivals nationwide. Carolyne lived in Chile and traveled in Brazil on a Fulbright grant. She returned to Brazil in 2018 on an Instituto Sacar artist residency in Bahia. She has also received NEA and 4 culture grants and a Fulbright Scholar Award she received in 2020. We'll take her back to Bahia after the COVID pandemic subsides there. Welcome, Carolyne.
Thanks for letting me unmute. and hello, everybody. Good afternoon here in Seattle. I am coming to you from traditional, unceded, but very much present Duwamish lands of the Coast Salish people. But the poems I'm reading today are basically set in New Orleans, which is the locus for a number of the poems in this new book, Masquerade. You can see from the cover, it looks a bit like Mardi Gras meets the Fillmore West, right? Those lively posters. But this one is, because of the war in Iraq, I have, not Iraq, I'm sorry. This is a new war, Ukraine, and I have been thinking about risk and danger and physical danger, as well as psychic and mental, emotional danger. So I'm going to read a few poems from Masquerade that treat this subject. The first one is called Another Country, which was a title of a novel by James Baldwin. Is that right? Yes. And this, the proverb that begins it as an epigraph is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? And we're in New Orleans. We're in the French Quarter at this point. Every night, counting 10s and 20s into the safe behind the Buddy Bolden poster, I cash out. Every night, you ease into this tourist bookshop just before the minute hand nudges 9. You nod, then withdraw into your own fog light and river dusk, so absent among the shelves that blonde debutantes lingering by the Fodor's Mardi Gras display let their pocketbooks loll open from tanned shoulders. From the counter, I watch you thumb through Rimbaud and Aimé Césaire, Belloc's portraits of Storyville quadroons, evening's women with their faces X'd out. You glance at me once. Lovers signal each other underground like shadows from opposing shores. Could I understand silences you need to survive? I never tell you of the Black man I'd seen stopped by a white cop in Louis Armstrong Park. The officer barked orders into his walkie-talkie, and the man stood flint still, legs spraddled, tin lunch bucket and denim work shirt dropped to the dirt beside him. He stared into nothing above the patrol cars strobing blue cherry. Scapegoat or suspicious character, how could he withstand such danger? A new anger rose in my throat. No place for me to say anything, stopped by my own skin. Whatever I did, only he could be pistol whipped back into this scene. In the French Quarter's after-hours air, I closed the bookshop door. You helped me swing the blistered shutters into place, drop the long-stemmed hooks into metal eyelets. On Royal Street, my hand stratified in yours, Napoleonic coats of arms and the stars and bars tacked across grillwork windows. The Faubourg Marigny's categorical shorthand. Your stories ride their boxcars through pine barrens, spar with the shadows of slave catchers, make a clean getaway under a tungsten moon. You inveigh against blonde CEOs in t-shirts and cut-off jeans like surfers at Newport Beach, feet propped on desks of old-growth teak, sneering at the rules they make you live by. In that storyboard you stand, arms limp at your sides in a suit coat and tie that would never change anything. They destroy me at a word, you say, a scary satisfaction in your accent. You rail against the middle class as if I weren't. Do you forget I'm here, on your side, no one you need to get even with? I'm ashamed of memory's complaints. You are faithful then, walking us home down the drive-by streets, poète maudite as householder, no safer than I in anybody's crosshairs. This Crescent City winter, I am I am foe of your foe, flesh of your flesh, questioning easy truths I've lived by. I don't know the score, the difficult history of our differences. I think all losses can be recompensed, all heartaches we deny each other across the years claimed for ourselves. In that other country where anger erases our names from each other's mouths, our younger selves let themselves into their indigo-hued front door and entwine in desire's pas de deux in a language that almost spells forgive. Well, that was a walk back home through the French Quarter. And now I'm going to be, this is a poem that I haven't really read publicly before. It is a canzone. This is the first canzone I have ever committed. And I have to thank Marilyn Hacker for giving me the template for the canzone. I see DeWitt Henry is here, and you know, Marilyn Hacker, of course, guest edited one issue of Plowshares. No, it's not a calzone. That's a possibility, but I'm glad to see somebody representing Plowshares here. But this poem is a canzone, so you'll hear the repetition of 5 end words that kind of cluster one per stanza, and the stanzas are 12 lines each. And it is called Head On, canzone Head On. And there are 2 head-ons, as you'll see in here. The 2 heads turned away from the head-on crash, turned away like dolls' heads from each other's in the pickup's crumpled cab, each averted head still, gray and bloodless in the probing headlights, strobing beacons of patrol cars on the highway shoulder in Ozark dark. The mountain boys and girls' head each turned away from the others in the last headlong swerve into the bus grill's blinding dark. As we passengers clamber from the bus's shuddering dark through the accident's sprung windows, clutching our own heads and groaning as we jump, drop, and stumble toward lights of the aid cars, shadows of heads in the revolving light. "Oh, shit," the driver had shouted as the midnight bus met headlights on the mountain curve out of town. He swerved to head off the oncoming shit. The bus bucked once, twice. Light flooded the windshield. Sleepers slammed awake against seat backs. Dome lights and smoke, groans and oil stench choked the aisle with another cry. "Jesus, help me!" A woman pinned between bulkhead lights and the fuel line as the rest of us scrambled from windows into light of helmeted medics' lanterns. Why did I make my way in blur of my broken glasses toward the crumpled truck? No way they had a chance. An officer pointed to the two heads, averted in light glinting off whiskey bottles in the crushed cab's reeking dark, each face still forming its last grimace to carry into the dark. Why can't I look away from these faces to avert the dark? Blind, drunk, had the young man swerved toward bus headlights, then too late away? Had his girl blacked out before dark smashed through? Why was their last protective gesture dark as instinct to turn, each to turn away, their unprotected heads away, each to meet the end alone against the head-on dark? I can't stop thinking, their bodies in the crushed cab's dark, their bodies down there where the engine rammed in, no other truth but crumpled blood cages in a metallic frame, no other truth so brutal. But I have to wrest myself from blood fallen dark toward ambulances, x-rays, glare of the ER waiting room. This way we survived. My call wakes you pre-dawn in shock's numbing sway. At dawn, a stopgap bus, stopping in every town along back roadways through the flat cotton plats of the Delta, reaches New Orleans by dark. I rise from the aisle where I've held my head in my hands the whole way to meet you at the station. Is it out of your way to meet me? Take me home in a cab that stops at every light? So many vehicles, so many streets going every which way. We hold hands carefully as unuttered thoughts all the way to the shotgun bungalow I'd helped you pay down. You step ahead and let me into the empty front room, my undamaged head still reeling as you show me around. The loving way you've sanded and varnished the antique moldings. In the other room, the loving way you pull me into bed, and I ask for another minute to ready myself in the unpainted bathroom at the other end of the shotgun hall. This moment to touch myself, wash away trapped passengers' groans, patrol car strobes stroking those other heads in the vertigo dark. This moment to towel my other saved face dry. Under the towel, a scarlet nightdress, dark with love stains, not my size, dress of another woman. I carry it out to you. If there's another story I should know, oh shit, you snap off the light, but I glimpse your dark face, gray with fear, light drained from our making love, the unnamed other woman's dress crumpled between us, silence averting our heads in sleep's blinding dark. All night, my head floodlit with images in reeling dreams, those gray heads drained of their breath, turned away from each other as I turn in fear's clairvoyance toward you, then away. Would we face in dreams through that headlong dark, how we'd avert our own lives, the rest of our light? Well, that was pretty intense. I think I'm going to change my program, and I'm going to read another poem that I have not read before. It's the final poem in the book, and it's not quite as intense. It's sort of it's set on a higher place, a higher peak, as it were. It's called The Devil and the Angel, and the devil speaks first. I know you blame me, don't you? You're thinking, why is he up here on Machu Picchu anyway? But I belong wherever you are. And the angel replies, blame? No more. Not after August's meteor showers have hailed down on these ancient fitted stones. After sunspots have risen above their 11-year vortices of storm, reversed their dark polarities. Blame? Not after the quantum arcs of angels, winged photons glow around the nerve ends. No demon, love. Earth's logic doing its dumb, dim best, trying to catch up to the intelligence that turns the spheres. My white dress lifts in this solar wind. The body takes itself for its own shadow print. You belong where no time has passed in these leaps across the synapses. Lucifer, glimmer inside a thought, epiphany and pride fall, not in opposition. Radiant darkness diffused by light. I am the angel of no losses, one wing in debt divided, connected by the sun's infernal touchstone. Welcome to my world. The demons are intrigued by our hard choices. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Next, we hear from Lillo Way, whose poetry collection, Lend Me Your Wings, was described by Ellen Bass as rich in music and in imagination, a celebration and a joy, which was released in July 2021 by Shanty Arts Publishing. Her chapbook, Dubious Moon, won the Slavering Hall Press Chapbook Contest. Her poems have won the E. Cummings Award and the Florida Review Editors Prize. Her writing has appeared in journals such as New Letters, Poet Law, Tampa Review, Louisville Review, Poetry East, and in many anthologies. Lillo has received grants from the NEA, New York State Council on the Arts, and the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation for her choreographic work involving poetry. Her website is www.lilloway.com. Welcome, Lillo.
Thank you so much, Mark, and for showing the cover of that book. I am delighted to be here and honored to be reading with these great poets, Susana, Maria, and Carolyne Wright, whom no one wants to follow in a reading, right? She's a tough act to follow. That was fantastic, Carolyne. Thank you. And everyone for your poems today. I'd like to read a few poems from the book that Mark mentioned, Lend Me Your Wings, with that pretty cover by Rachel Broomer. And there are 6 more prints of hers inside the book. As you may have noticed, the poems in this collection have been described as taking the reader on a ride with things that fly, including birds, ghosts, ancestors, a ghost or two, and oops, I've just lost my, oh, Mark, could you take that down a sec? Thank you. Sorry, a little technical glitch there. As well as humans attempting to flee. In this first poem, entitled Flying, you'll meet an aerialist, a flying trapeze artist. The epigraph reads, "For my grandmother, Lillo Dillon, of the Flying Dillons, Barnum and Bailey, greatest show on earth, circa 1900. Flying. It's about your eyes, yours and your brother's, as you time your run up the rungs of the twin flimsy ladders. It's about your fingers catching and wrapping the trapeze bar, about the whoosh as he slings it from his platform perch. It's about the platform and your soft slippered feet as they push you from it into thick air. It's about the air, warm there near the top of the big top, the smell of hot canvas, the taste of your makeup melting, about the clips that must not fail to hold your chignon to your head, about the whalebone stays of your corseted waist, the swell of your lungs above them, the cotton tights that want to bag at your knees over your bar, your brother's over his, breathing measured to the music. It's about your arms, stretched downward from the fly bar, the sweep of your legs held tight together, the point of your feet, the certainty your hands can reach, will clasp wrists, your wrists bruised with the seams of his fingers, then the letting go. It's about the letting go. His eyes, your arms, the trapeze, its song. Yeah. In this next poem, the wings belong to a venerated Ecuadorian sculpture, the Winged Virgin of Quito, also known as the Dancing Madonna. She's a small wood carving from 1734 and includes imagery from native Andean religions. Reproductions of the sculptures of this sculpture are found in major museums throughout the world. And in this poem, the Madonna is speaking to her creator. Oh, and one final note, the last word in this poem is a type of butterfly. From the Winged Virgin of Quito, the Dancing Madonna, to Bernardo de la Garda, woodcarver. You made me sweat and weep and dance away my years on the surface of this earth. You put nothing between me and it but a snake, holiest of creatures because legless, who slithers belly to belly with Mother Earth, skin intimate. I fling the blue shawl you gave me, swing my skirt, laugh faster, stomp higher, swerve and curve in a manner better suited to a Hindu goddess than a Virgin Mary. But look now, today you've carved feathers rippling from my scapula. Well, plume the serpent and wing my dancing feet, feather my breast and sprout a pair of pinions from my hips. Give me wings that undulate, heavier than a condor's, faster than a hummingbird's, more transparent than a cicada's, tinier than a fairy fly's. And please angle all these wings in different and opposing directions, causing me to jig and hula, bellying my dance out of here, flying not straight up with the angels, but sideways with the dragonflies, swooping with the swallows, flitting and staggering with the fritillaries. The epigraph for this next poem reads, "For David S. Buckle, environmentalist and Lambda lawyer, who on April 14th, 2018, self-immolated in Prospect Park, Brooklyn." Offering. "O lion tail, swing yourself, arch, strike the match, its shocking bloom, flame hair devouring eye satisfied. Lion hungry belly, fill with him that you might spare the children. You fire-breathing beasts of despair with all your heads and horns, your long tail scales, fray the rope, tip the hope, balance farther, a little farther toward no more." Ting! The finger symbol rings flawless into the night. Ting! Twice more. Funeral flares fling embers into our ears before the final silence, when children's mouths will fill with ash. Unbuckle him, unburn him, unfuel his futile flames, unfossil the fumes, re-gold them, fold him in our unarmed arms. I never set out to write a love poem, but sometimes when one is finished, I realize it is a love poem. Here's one of those titled "At Least for Tonight," and it's written for my partner, Bill. "At least for tonight, you'll deep those atoms, they'll swirl and settle. Drops on the bloom side of a parasol, a parapluie, a beside sun, beside rain, not against. In bed, I cup my hand around your roundness, cells plumped with fat, but not in this day's tidings, with cancer, not this year. When I sprawl over you as you nap on your back, you are my extra firm beauty rest. I am not your blanket. I'm a bobcat scrambling our connective tissue. You say I'm not hurting you, but I know you'll put up with pain to be this close to another animal, skin pretending to be our only barrier. We're going to lie down one day the way we did today, when we're too tired to go on. Weight of your big head, my neck and cheek, your pillow. As you surrender, the container that holds your thoughts drops a millimeter farther into my jugular and jaw. Fear, our dominant emotion, gone. Control, our dominant action, over. What if we'd let go earlier? Spent decades lying here in this place, which looks a lot like how we'd imagined it. In your sleep, you smile the perfect smile, one I've never seen before. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Lillo. Next, we hear from Maria Mazziotti Gillan, who is a recipient of the 2014 George Garrett Award for Outstanding Community Service in Literature from AWP, the 2011 Barnes & Noble Writers for Writers Award from Poets and Writers, and the 2018 American Book Award for her book, All That Leaves Between Us, from Guernica Editions. She is the founder and executive director of the Poetry Center at Passaic County Community College in Paterson, New Jersey, and editor of the Paterson Literary Review. She's also a Bartle Professor and Professor Emerita of English and Creative Writing at Binghamton, SUNY, where she has published 24 books. Her most recent books are When the Stars Were Still Visible from Stephen F. Austin State University Press, and the Poetry and Photography collaboration with Mark Hilringhouse, Paterson Light and Shadow, Serving House Books, and the poetry collection What Blooms in Winter, New York Books, 2016. Others include The Girls in the Chartreuse Jackets, Ancestors' Song, the silence in an empty house, writing poetry to save your life, how to find the courage to tell your stories, the place I call home, and what we pass on, collected poems, 1980 to 2009 from Guernica Editions. Maria is co-editor of 4 anthologies with her daughter Jennifer. Visit her website, mariagillan.com, and her blog, mariagillanblogspot.com. Her artist website is mariamazzottigillan.com. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you. I hope I'm unmuted. I seem to have had some difficulty in that way. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay. I'm going to start by reading a couple of poems from my latest collection, which has I started painting again. I did paint when I was younger. And then about 15 years ago, I went on a reading tour with Diane DePrima, and she said, we're going to buy paints. And I thought she was buying them for herself. And it turns out she wanted me to buy paints. And we were going to Santa Cruz to do a reading. And we got there and she said, okay, you go in your room and I'll go in my room and we'll both paint. I thought I was going to faint. There I am with this famous poet and she wants me to paint. And I get inside and I get scared. And I look at the roses outside my window and nothing I do is right. And I keep ripping up the pages. And then I say, what do you tell your students? It doesn't have to be anybody else's poem. It only has to be your poem. So think about the art in the same way. It doesn't have to be anybody else's rose. It just has to be your rose. Anyway, this poem is called Meatloaf and Hamburger Helper. Growing up, my mother cooked macaroni and gravy, meatballs and braciole, spinach, lentil soup, roasted chicken and potatoes, made zeppoli, big salads fresh from the garden, zucchini with rosemary, meals so delicious I can still taste them. When my children were growing up, my mother-in-law taught me how to make American food that my husband liked because he grew up on it. I learned how to make pot roast and legless lamb and roast beef, pork chops, and baked potatoes. She taught me how to make meatloaf, which was cheap and could be used for one meal plus sandwiches. She taught me to make meals with hamburger helper, which my mother called that junk. Years later, my stomach turns at the whole thought of hamburger helper, the greasy feel of it, the fake chemical taste of salt and sauce and spices, flavor created in a lab. But when I served those meals so different from anything my mother ever made, I felt I had arrived in middle-class America, that now I belonged in a land that almost guaranteed you'd die from a heart attack before you could reach old age, and not the land of my father, too poor to buy all this meat, even if he had wanted it. My father, who died at 92, sitting in his garden in the sun, the aroma of tomatoes and peppers and zucchini perfuming the air around him. And I'm going to read a poem called Chalk, Dust, and Light. In the ballroom at the Marriott in Albany, New York, in the middle of this conference, I remember suddenly Miss Ferrara's voice in 5th grade when she read poems and stories to us. Her big eyes soft as a doe's, her generous mouth, her love of words, and how her love of those words made us love them too. Miss Ferraro, I write to you from a distance of 64 years to thank you for all those hours of reading aloud in the dusty classroom of PS 18, for treating me as if I were your child, for touching my arm when you passed me in the aisle, for filling the classroom with chalk, dust, and light, the light that came from you, a husky voice I still remember. Thank you for the way you changed my life, opened doors inside me I didn't know were there, or teaching me that books could take me away to places I'd never been, to places I might never see. And I'm going to read a poem to my son. I don't know how he could grow up in my house and be an arch conservative, but he is. What I can't face about someone I love, but that my son loves me, would prefer not to see me too much. Every Sunday night, When I call him in North Carolina, where he lives with his wife and 2 children, I can hear the heaviness in his voice, his low tempered with impatience, our conversation stiff and stilted, though I always think I can talk to a stone. Strangers in buses and trains tell me their life histories. Acquaintances tell me about their affairs and shattered marriages, show me the secret undersides of their lives. My graduate students vie for my attention. They want to sit next to me and carry my bags and fetch my lunch. But my son can't wait to get off the phone with me. I ask him how the children are, or specific questions about school, ask about his wife, his job. He answers 1 or 2 words. They're fine, or okay, or the same. My son is a lawyer. He was always brilliant with language, at least written language, and he can read a 300-page book in an hour and remember every detail. With me, he turns mute as a stump. If I ask for help with some legal problem, of course he will give it, but I do not hear in his voice the lilt I hear in my daughter's voice when I call her. Instead, I hear reluctance, as though his attention were focused on some truly fascinating person, and he can't wait to get off the phone. I tell stories that I hope will amuse him, but finally, after struggling and finding no response, I can't wait to hang up. I say, well, John, have a good week. Give everyone a hug for me. I know my son has divorced me, somewhere deep inside himself in a place he doesn't look at. I am too much for him, too loud, too dramatic, too frantic, too emotional. I laugh too much. I wear him out in a minute and a half. If he never saw me again, he wouldn't miss me. And this is what I can't face about someone I love. And let me see. I should have kept counting. I'm going to read a poem called The Little General. My brother called our mother the Little General when we were teenagers. My brother driving the car, my mother sitting next to her, her head, a small dark knob, barely reaching the top of the seat. My bossy mother who told us how to live our lives. My mother who was always moving. When I remember, I see her almost as a blur, like the cartoon of the Roadrunner. My mother, who washed all the dishes as soon as the last bite of fruit vanished from the plate. Mother, who held my doctor brother's foot until he fell asleep when he was still a boy. My mother, who sat at the kitchen table with us, always ready to hear the stories of our lives, ready to tell the story of hers. My mother, who told me everything that was wrong with me, so I still hear her voice, though she said she told me for my own good. My mother, who loved the feel of the earth on her hands, who smelled the flour and spices, who baked thousands of loaves of bread, cooked innumerable fragrant meals for her children and grandchildren in her basement kitchen. My mother, who taught me how to laugh. My mother, who could not read or write, and though she wanted to go to school, my father wouldn't let her. Women don't need to go to school, he said. My mother, who did not know how much money my father had in the bank and never wrote a check. My mother, who wanted to learn how to do everything. My mother, who could quote poems she memorized in 3rd grade in Italy before she had to leave school. My mother, who drew an imaginary line around us to keep us close. The front stoop, our boundary. The family, our country. Her little sturdy body, better than any magic charm. My mother, whose skin turned orange before she died. The week before she got sick, she planted a huge garden. We were sure she was too powerful to die. Ma, even now, 20 years after the funeral procession led us to Calvary Cemetery and the mausoleum door they found you in, I wish I could drive over to your house and find you there, your earthy humor, your warm arms that always were the place I call home. And I'm going to read a poem called The Tin Ball and the War Effort. Guillermo worked in a silk factory in Patterson for 4 years. He was tall and slender and patrician, his thick gray hair perfectly shaped, though he went to the barber on 16th Street and 5th Avenue and not a fancy stylish. Guillermo married my Zia Luisa, my honorary aunt, when they were in their 40s. Guillermo was Zia Luisa's 4th husband. All the others died. You'd think that would have given him pause. They lived in a 2nd floor apartment in the tenement on 17th Street. We lived on the 1st floor. Suyama was my godfather and treated me like the child he never had. When they'd visit me, he and my father would talk politics. They both adored FDR. They drank anisette in small glasses and espresso in tiny cups with tiny spoons to stir in the sugar. My uncle would give me a drop of espresso and sugar in a glass of milk. He smoked Camels 3 packs a day. I always think of him with smoke curling around him, letting me help him remove the tin foil from his cigarette packs. And together we'd add to the tin ball we were constructing. When it was large as a basketball, he took it to be recycled for the war. I was 5. I didn't know what the war was, except my father and uncle listened to the news and read the papers and discussed what was happening in Europe. I don't know what they did with those tin balls we constructed so carefully, but I remember Iziwayama with slow and slender fingers, artist's hands, and they would handle everything with such delicacy and grace. He let me sit with him on his central floor porch while he carved birds' houses and whirligigs out of pine to decorate his garden. He let me walk with him between the thick corn stalks in his garden, the tassels of corn fine as silk. Let me help him pick tomatoes and peppers and zucchini. Suyama was very quiet and reserved. Louisa was tempestuous and loud. She wore whalebone corsets to hold in her large breasts and body. She loved to dance tarantella. She had a little handkerchief neatly ironed and folded that she used to pat away the sweat. She always yelled at Suyama. He'd hide from her in the garden and pretend not to hear. My mother said she'd hear Louisa crying in the middle of the night, but didn't know why. During the day, she was the general, Suyama the private. Even then, I wondered why I felt sorrow coming off him in waves. The day after he retired, he was walking back from Mazziotti grocery store on the corner of 4th Avenue. He collapsed on the sidewalk and died. Though that happened more than 40 years ago, I can conjure Suyama up alive in my memory as he was when we sat together creating that tin ball, the smell of camels filling the air around us. And I was his child till I sparkled like the silver ball in the dark. And I'm going to finish with a poem. My husband had early onset Parkinson's disease, and he took 25 years to die. This poem is called Watching the Bridge Collapse. I watched the bridge collapse. Minnesota, rush hour, trucks and cars suspended over water, cars swaying and falling. Imagine what those people felt, caught as they were in their cars, listening to music or All Things Considered, or to a mystery on tape. Imagining their families waiting for them, the dinner bubbling on the stove, the TV program they planned to watch, when everything they knew, everything they believed they could trust, crashed and broke between them, that final moment of disbelief, and then the terror as they fell. Sometimes I think all of our lives are like that. We really believe we are safe, the roads we travel built to last, and are shocked no matter how many times it happens when the ground falls away. That moment in slow motion when we're all walking confident, strong through one day, the next instant when we fall stupid and helpless on the floor. It was like that when you got sick. Can it be so many years ago already? When we were young, we loved each other. Our children were smart and healthy and beautiful. How could we lose? Then one day you would swim 100 laps in the town pool, or ran even in a midwinter snowstorm, began to move slower and slower. Your hands are no longer functioning the way they always had. Your legs unwilling to obey the brain's command. Now your head bent sideways so it nearly touches your shoulder. Your legs so weak they cannot hold you up. Your voice thin as a thread. Now you even need your aid to feed you. We hang on like those cars that trembled and swayed at the edge of the broken span. as frightened, as unbelieving as those people must have been on that Minnesota bridge when everything they believed about themselves and the world turned out to be wrong. Nothing between us and terror, except air that seems suddenly so thin we cannot breathe. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Next, we hear from Susana H. Case, who is the author of 8 books of poetry, including Dead Shark on the N Train from Broadstone Books, which was a Pinnacle Book Award for the best poetry book, and a New York City Big Book Award distinguished favorite, and a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Book Award. She's also the author of 5 chapbooks. Her first collection, The Scottish Cafe, from Slappering Hall Press, was re-released in a dual language English-Polish version, Kawiarina Szloka, from Opal University Press. Her poems have been translated into Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese in addition to that. With Margot Taft-Stever, Susana has edited the anthology I Want to Be Loved by You poems on Marilyn Monroe, Milk and Cake Press in 2022. In 2021, she became a co-editor of Slappering Hall Press, and her website is www.susanahcase.com. Welcome, Susana.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Cassandra, Jonathan, and Mark for having me. And I'm so happy to be reading with Carolyne, Lillo, and Maria. Maria, that last poem of yours was just incredible. I don't know how to follow that with my work exactly, but I will give it the college try. So the Damage Done is really a one long poem which is broken into parts, and the underlying theme is the malfeasance of the FBI during the COINTELPRO years. So although that started in the 50s, the action in the book takes place in the late 60s and early 70s. And what happened under that program is that the FBI targeted various progressive groups, civil rights groups, Black Panthers, for example, but also Martin Luther King, feminist groups, anti-war groups, all kinds of groups like that with illegal activities. But there's a lot more in the book. There's the protagonist is a model named Janie who contributed to progressive causes. So there's a lot in the book about her and her eating disorder. There's sex, there's drugs, there's rock and roll. So a lot of things. And I'm going to start actually with a love poem to a car, the car in which at the beginning of the series, she is found dead. So this is Dear Gia. Dear type 34 lipstick red Carmen Gia, dear razor edge Gia, expensive Gia, styled in Italy, anointed by the gods. You are the car I would drive if I weren't the Volkswagen van type. Gia, seemingly more BMW than VW, finished by 1969, unlike the war, the surveillance, the 60s. So fast and sexy, the wood grain dash, so lusciously not a clunky American machine. My car, that's not my car. That will probably never be my car. I will always love you. Dear coupe, that is not mine. I want to cry at this deprivation, life so unfair. Dare I steal you? Of course I don't dare, knowing you for a container of death, holding a woman who looks like she's sleeping. Yet there's so much lust for you, so much larceny in my heart. This poem is one of a series in the collection threaded throughout of epistolary poems, poems in the form of letters. And in most of these, which are signed by me, I am inserting myself otherwise into the action of the book, which otherwise has nothing to do with me. And this is another of the epistolary poems. I've decided to concentrate on those for this reading. This is called Dear Carol. On TV, when I see a marcher decked in helmet, body armor, carrying a gun, demonstrating in support of the worst president ever, a cop shaking his hand as if greeting a member of the club, I think of you in skinny capris, your light brown hair teased into a crown, so queen-like and so damn young. Do you ever think about the doo-wop we listened to that summer in the Catskills on my tinny transistor? Back in the city after vacation, it took 3 subway trains to visit you in Brownsville, the graffiti-covered halls of the walk-up where you lived. I was a free-range teen, savvy about the subway, less so about social class, and I was the one who always made the trip to Brooklyn. Remember when you announced your engagement? He was a cop, your voice rising at the end in excitement as you offered your hand to show off your ring. We were barely adults. By then, it seemed the police were rioting everywhere. Oh, I said, forgetting my manners. Silence, and the chasm already there opened up that last time we spoke. This one is an epistolary poem signed by Janie. So this is the one point in the series in which she speaks. Her story is, because she is dead at the beginning, is told in flashback. So this is titled Flashback Before the Dinner Party. Dear black lace Balenciaga flamenco dress I found in a secondhand shop in London. Thank God for the old couture, more fun than getting newer versions as presents from wealthy men with large expectations, so decadent the cost of clothes. Dear memory that never leaves of the crowded family cabin where mother died in the West Virginia hills, the roof leaking, the steps down from the porch creaking, dear beaded velvet shoes to go with the dress, to rough it up, dear side swept pixie hair, dear pills. Dear so-called bad apples. Dear tightly wound killers of those already kneeling in submission on the worn bare floor, dear tactical unit cops, more than a little cranky, heads going off like percussion caps, once the cool professional, the detonator in waiting arranges deaths, the Fed who steps back into shadow, knowing the dead can't speak, dear assassinate expediters of body bags, who puts a loaded gun to the belly of a pregnant woman? You show up and people move inside or slink down the street, creator of martyrs, of revolutionary groups that don't exist, of false assassination threats. You ought to instill more fear than your fake militants, but this country is sleepy, yawns, allows you to persist. This is something that the FBI actually did when they raided, and the local police, when they raided Fred Hampton's apartment and assassinated him in the late 60s. He was there with his girlfriend who was pregnant at the time and ended up with a gun in her belly. So this is another love epistolary poem, and it is everyone says cento, but the Italian student in me wants to say cento. So whichever, it is made up of a series of lines from various Jimi Hendrix songs, and it's called Dear Jimi Hendrix. You only got 200 days. I wish you'd hurry up and rescue me. May I land my kinky machine? Let me stand next to your fire. Oh, but my mind is cold and reeling. Lately, things just don't seem the same. You break love. That's the way it goes. I want to love you so much till I can't stand it. But if you don't come back, you know I'll have to starve to death. Can't you see me begging you on my knees? Then come on across to me. Well, you can do anything, but I'm just a night bird flying over the sea. This next one introduces one of the characters in the series, a detective in New York City who's a bit ambivalent about the FBI, but is trying to do his job. It's called Dear Detective. Hunched, well, it doesn't actually introduce him, but it's further along the series, but it introduces him to you. Dear Detective, hunched up against backyard dampness, smoking, you watch the sky, think about the tomatoes that haven't been planted for years, old canning jars bunched on a basement shelf next to a table saw, now gathering dust. Think about having to cover up something to let it grow. Only the brightest stars are visible. Too much light from neighbors' houses and street lamps. You scan for something familiar, the Big Dipper, but everything is a random jumble. Tomatoes, maybe time to plant zucchini too. About zucchini, there's always too much of it. Your son runs out in his pajamas to shriek. Aquarius, let the sunshine in, just won a Grammy for Record of the Year, as if you might care, before rushing back in. And you remain standing, a lone sentinel, your neck starting to hurt as lights in the houses close by begin to dim, and you realize the deadline's passed to escape. This is another flashback, dear Janie. You wait for the lighting to be set up. It's quiet except for seagulls, the crew, you chattering. It's so much colder when your bare feet touch the sand on this Santa Barbara beach. The landscape in the distance is visible, unlike the mountain hollows you know so well. Nothing can hide, not a black sedan, a man motionless and persistently watching on an ocean road where everyone else is on the move. You gyrate at the water's edge in a striped Kenzo dress, could be selling anything. Put on your professional smile that says, this is fun. You wish you were having fun somewhere else, Paris, or a place where you could avoid getting wet, a club with a good blues band. That night, you take some pills and fall asleep, dream of someone falling off a mountain, wake up screaming. And the man sits outside your hotel in his shiny sedan, both of you sleepless, waiting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susana. That was wonderful. And I'd like to thank all of you once again for what a great reading tonight with Carolyne Wright, Lillo Way's amazing reading, Maria Mazziotti Gillan, fantastic reading, and Susana, wonderful. And just a brief note about what's coming up. Our next session is on March 12, which features British poet Glyn Maxwell, Ben Mazer, Romanian-American poet Andrea Iulia Spridon, Katia Kapovic, and Philip Nikolaev. So please don't miss that. And also we have a few other things lined up, which could be quite exciting. On April 9, we have a Paul Hoover special, which will be featuring Sharon Mesmer, Kim Lyons, Donald Ravel, Marjorie Perloff. On April 16, we will be at the New Orleans Poetry Festival, and we will be celebrating the poet Kalamu Ya Salam. And April 30, Forrest Gander, Joe Safdie, Aliki Barnstone, and Liliana Sekelu appear. So we've got quite a few interesting shows coming up. Please do join us for those. In the meantime, I'm going to pass the mic over to my co-host, I believe Jonathan Penton tonight, who is doing the open mic. Yeah,
that's the plan. All right, we've got a very full open mic tonight. We've got 6 readers. So without further ado, let's introduce the first. Everybody's going to read 1 poem each. Cindy Hockman, do you have something for us?
I do, and it's very silly. It's called Why Adam and Eve Didn't Give a Fig, a revisionist biblical sonnet. And I have to say, I don't write in form, but this is an actual sonnet, 14 lines in iambic pentameter, but it's silly. The Garden of Eden had no apples. The fruit of the day was the almighty grape. Love did not end up in wedding chapels. By now, your mouth is probably agape. Modern couples are often ill-fated. Did it ever occur to you how come? 'Cause those Bible folk inebriated. They ate no apples, but they sure loved rum. We'd all be better off if they ate pears and taken much higher moral stances and didn't run around in underwears, rented flicks instead of drunken dances. And while their figs were drying on the vine, I double-crossed Eve and made Adam mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Great ending. But I promise you I can find a way to get drunk off pears. Next up is John Wesick. John, what have you got for us today?
Well, it's another one in the series inspired by Cindy and Bob. Patricia Kerrigan's Christmas tree is still green in July. Maybe there's a cursed portrait of Dorian bonsai with loose dentures and needles gone to gray. Maybe it's a vampire. I hear vampire trees prey on vegetables, not people, though it must be a shock to open the crisper drawer and find the zucchini sucked dry through fang marks in its green skin. If Patricia's pantry is not enough, the tree transforms into a helicopter seed that spirals out the window to feed on Park Avenue sugar maples. Of course, helicopter seeds can't fly back upstairs. The tree's walk of shame past a smirking doorman is worth it because every day in Patricia's penthouse is Christmas.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. The tree
She's heard
walk
it before, but it's always good to embarrass Patricia Kerrigan. So
sounds fair.
No problem. It's okay. I gave approval.
All right, next up is Edward Wells. And Edward, you need to share the screen. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, you should be able to now.
Thank you, Edward.
There we go. Edward, thank you. That was very cool. All right, next we're going to hear from Bob Heeman. Bob?
Hi, folks. This is a very short information piece. Information. The heart can sometimes be repaired with thread and a curved needle, such as sailmakers use. But its ability to love in the future can never be guaranteed.
Excellent. Thank you. Maha, is that Maha Reed Divine? Is that right?
Okay, here I am, Major.
Meja, nice to meet you.
Okay. This is a found poem. I want to emphasize, I didn't make this up. Yeah, I found it. And then, so it alternates between what I found and then the narrator's reaction to it. The lines alternate. Okay, a found poem. How to Eat Pussy. A Guide to Cunnilingus by Katie Herzog. It was found in a local newspaper in Seattle called The Stranger in 2019. Okay, here's the newspaper line followed by the narrator's line. Number 1, know what you're dealing with. The vagina is the hole. The urethra is where the pee comes out. The clitoris is the little hood-like thing situated at the top of the labia, parentheses, or lips, parentheses close, and the vulva is the full package. Now the narrator's voice. Mina's eyes bug out. Even after doing graduate work in the US, living there for decades, adopting the new culture, the Confucian Calvinistic inhibition frostbites her. Don't people get locked up for writing in public like this? Newspaper. Number 2, start slowly. When you think about how men masturbate, it's often very fast and furious. Reaction: every cell in Mina squirms. Number 3, your tongue is not a sword. Flat and broad is better than sharp and stabby. Reaction: she remembers such a sword. Her response: frozen. He finally muttered, ladies are supposed to like it. She still loved him. Number 4, breathe on the clit without really touching it. Then give it a soft kiss. And then stop and start again. In the beginning, less is more. And the longer you tease, the more aroused she will be when you finally plunge your face in. Reaction: what? What was that she felt? Should she respond? Respond? Even as frostbitten? She still loved him. She loved love. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Very cool. Okay, let's go ahead and hear from Susan Dickey. Susan?
I'm unmuting here. Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks for letting me read on open mic tonight. I appreciate it. I wrote this poem inspired by Frank Zappa's quote, "Politics is the entertainment of the arms industry." I was very angry when I wrote this, so you'll probably feel my rage. No collateral damage. Why not gather all arms manufacturers, their dealers, money makers, and move them to Mars? They can bring their dick missiles, build some nations to bomb away. Look there, see the flare, eyes melting, feeling the heat of the wave. Millions obliterated, survivors radiated, no collateral damage. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
We did hear it. All right, we're going to close with a haiku from Patricia Kerrigan. Patricia, you had a haiku for us?
Haiku discussion. Words speak out on same subject. Ideas declare war.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, that's our show for today. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks so much to our features for reading. Cassandra, Mark, do you have anything you'd like to say as we head out?
Yes, I'd like to say something about the poor people of Ukraine and what they're going through at the moment and their incredible courage. And here's a little poem about them, just a very short one. Birth of a Nation. Keep your head, or so it was said, when there were guillotines. On the other hand, they said, find the confidence in your words. This side of the war is peaceful. All the world's diamonds, miles of them, repeat, one eye glaring into dreams. The ground is saying, don't stop. Keep on walking until the leaves change color. Now black and blue, they burn into earth. And so I dedicate this show to the people of Ukraine. And I thank you all for such a wonderful night. And let's hope when we wake up tomorrow, the world is a better place. Love and poetry. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Love and poetry. Lit is a balm for our hearts. Yeah. So we'll all be in touch. Thank you so
We
much
will.
for coming, everybody.
you.
Thanks for inviting us, Cassandra and Mark.
Fantastic.
Yes,
One
it's
of my
great.
favorites. Mwah.
Yes, and I'm excited about the upcoming programs. I'd love to hear Katya and Philip, whom I've known since forever, and also Forrest, who's a more recent friend. So yeah,
Look forward to seeing you guys.
yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks for, Maria and Susana and Lillo, who had to depart already, for love poetry.
And fish.
Fish.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, fish.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're a great
Good
reading.
night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Good to see
Night,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good to see you, Major and everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll be
you.
in touch. I owe you an email. I'll be emailing you soon.
Okay.
And I'll be seeing you in May, Brownstones.
Yes. Oh, great. Yes. Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye.